Once upon a time there was a boy whose name was Jack. He lived with his mother and they were very poor. The old woman made a living by spinning, but Jack was so lazy he would just bask in the sun all day long, and so they called him Lazy Jack. Jack's mother couldn't get him to do anything for her until one Monday she said, "Jack, if you don't start working for your porridge, I'm going to kick you out and you'll have to make a living on your own." This aroused Jack, and he set off the next day and hired himself to a farmer for a penny. But on his way back home, never having had dealt with money before, he lost it over a brook. When he got back home, his mother said, "You silly boy, you should have carried it in your pocket." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. So he set off on Wednesday and hired himself to a cowkeeper. The cowkeeper paid him with a jar of milk. So Jack took the jar of milk and put it in the pocket of his jacket, but he spilt most of it before he got home. When he got back, his mother said, say it with me, "You silly boy, you should have carried it on your head." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. So on Thursday, Jack set off and hired himself again to another farmer. This time the farmer paid him with cream cheese. So Jack put the cream cheese on his head and set himself on his way back home. But by the time he got home, the cream cheese was all spoiled and matted in his hair. His mother said, "You silly boy, you should have carried it carefully in your hands." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. So on Friday, Lazy Jack set off again, and this time he hired himself to a baker. The baker wouldn't pay him with anything beside a large tomcat. So Jack carefully picked up the cat in his hands and went on his way back home. But pretty soon the cat started clawing at him, and soon Jack was compelled to let go of the cat. So when he got home, his mom said, "You silly boy, you should have tied it up and dragged it along behind you." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. So on Friday, Jack set off and hired himself to a butcher, who paid him with a very handsome shoulder of mutton. Jack tied it up and dragged the piece of meat along in the dirt behind him, but by the time he got home, the meat was spoiled. So his mother said, "You silly boy, tomorrow is Sunday and we'll have to have cabbage for dinner. You should have carried it on your shoulders." "I'll do so another time," replied Jack. So finally, the next Monday, Jack set off one last time. This time he hired himself to a cattle keeper who paid him with a donkey. Jack lifted with all his might to get the donkey on his shoulders, and he finally got it and slowly started walking back home. Now, on his journey, Jack just so happened to walk by the wealthy man. He lived with his only daughter, who was beautiful, but she couldn't hear and she couldn't speak. Now his daughter had never laughed before, but the doctors said whoever would make her laugh would allow her to speak again. So it just so happened that day the daughter was looking out the window and she saw Jack carrying that heavy donkey on his shoulders. And when she saw the donkey's legs sticking straight up in the air, she couldn't help but burst out into a fit of laughter. And she started laughing, and the next thing you know, her speech and her hearing were back. The king was so overjoyed that he kept his promise and married his beautiful daughter to Jack. And they lived in a big, beautiful house, and Jack's mother lived with them, and they lived happily ever after. The end.